Welcome to Making Stuff Up, the podcast by the Quinte Arts Council team, where we talk to all kinds of creators about how they got interested in making stuff up. You're here with your hosts, Cody, Heather, and Janet. This week, we're talking to Fred Leonard Jr., a historical writer who wrote the book Grandma's Spirit, Calling Us Home to Tyendinaga. The book is about the lives of some of Fred's ancestors, and he is telling their stories. Fred, welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself and your background for our listeners?
I am Fred Leonard. I have a Mohawk Irish heritage. I was born here in Belleville, grew up in Toronto, and then came back out here in my adulthood. Lived happily ever after. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm going to be saying this wrong, but you hear your grandmother's spirit's voice? Is that?
It's what it is, the voice in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I'm told it's a gift of discernment. I can discern what is my thoughts and what is spirit. I think this happens to everybody, but most people can't tell the difference. What I say to people to help them is if you have something that comes into your mind that you haven't thought of in the last couple of days, haven't seen it online, haven't seen it on TV, pay attention to that more and more. Something comes out of the blue, it happens to everybody. You're like, oh, where'd that come from? Pay attention to that.
So in the book it talks about, or somewhere I read that you were speaking to a seer, and the seer mentioned that you have this gift. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, she's has a lot more experience and education on this than I do. But when I first found out I'm supposed to write this book, I asked her, I don't know anything about my great-grandmother, who was my spirit guide, and the other ancestors. And she said, well, I'll just tell you what comes to me. But she said, most of this book is going to come from her through you as you go on. And I did experience that. At times I could be sitting with a pen and paper, and it felt like the pen was moving by itself at times. It was just flowing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then find out afterwards that it was factual.
Yeah.
When I did research.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like she told me of a large stone shaped like a turtle on the territory where my great-grandmother was born. And nobody there knew about this. And eventually I found it. It's a very secluded area. And there's a picture of it in the book.
Yes,
well.
we saw that.
Yeah.
Yes. For our listeners, you have to look at the middle of the book, has some great images.
That's such a neat way of hearing from ancestors, because their voices are so often forgotten, and they have such important stories to tell. Some of the stories were very moving, especially about your great-grandmother's children. That was very sad.
Yeah, losing her children, but she wasn't the only one.
No.
We hear about the residential schools of the children who are old enough to go to school, but a lot of babies were taken as well, like my grandfather and his twin sister. So he must grew up feeling something deep inside was wrong, not a connection. He grew up in Toronto, very much a city boy. He had no connection to his roots. So,
Were you hearing from your grandmother for a while before you decided to write all these stories down? Or did you feel right away, as soon as she started speaking to you, that you should get this into book form?
For maybe 6 months before I saw the seer and she told me this, I was getting, again, that voice in my head about writing a book. But I was saying to myself, I can't write a book. Geez, I was the class clown sitting in the back of the class, disturbing the class. I'd be the last one to write a book.
Well, you wouldn't know that from the book, because it's there's so much in the book. There's so much depth to it.
And she said, it's in you to do this. The ancestors said so. So I found out, a hidden talent, I guess. But a lot of it is through their guidance, their articulation, not so much mine.
There's a point in the book where you ask your great-grandmother when you should start. Something like, how far back do I go? And the response is, you ask, where does a road begin? And she says...
I asked,
it begins where you step into it?
I asked the seer, Doreen South.
Oh, the seer, okay.
Where do I start? How far back do I go in time? And then the spirit of my great-grandmother came through and said, where does a road start? And I didn't know what to respond to that question. And she said, the road starts where you step onto it. So if you find enough information before my time that's relevant, then write about it. And I was able to get back to the mid-1600s.
Yeah, I think we all learned a lot about the history reading this book.
Why was it important to you to tell your great-grandmother's story?
Oh, it was very spiritually inspired. I just felt this must be important. I can't say no. If I do say no, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to get hit by a lightning bolt or something? I don't know. But there's no way I could say no from something in the spirit world like that. And I already had a deep connection to her. So I sometimes feel like I'm a male version of her, basically.
So why do you think you have, what makes this connection so deep with your great-grandmother?
It's just the constant communication every day. It's like a close friend. Yeah, very much so.
Did you ever have any communication issues throughout the process, or was it always just very fluid?
I would do things to try to help it along, whether it's meditate. I'm not good at meditating. And it didn't seem to matter what I did. It's just when she was ready to communicate with me, she's ready. I find being alone in the woods helpful. It's a spiritual place. But it always seemed to be on their time, or maybe when they felt I was ready to be communicated with.
So you really had to be flexible and open-minded.
Yeah.
A few of your ancestors sort of speak through you, right?
Yes, it's mainly my great-grandmother, but at times I realized that there is more. Yeah.
There was like a question and answer part in the end of the
Yes.
book. So how many of your ancestors do you sort of hear from? Is that the right way to ask that?
Yeah, I'd say 90% of the time it's just my great-grandmother. Sometimes it's an ancestor of hers named Isaac Hill. And then there's a woman that was born in the mid-1600s named Joanna, which means she has a new word. It's mainly those three that I feel, that I recognize anyway. Yeah.
So in the question and answer, did you actually then reach out to other ancestors and ask them the question, or did those answers just come to you?
I asked the seer Doreen South the
okay.
questions, and whoever came, I felt they communicated with me what questions to ask,
Oh, okay.
and then they would answer through her. And I just left it open, whoever wanted to answer the question. And that's how it
Fascinating.
came about. And I noticed they all seem to be from the Bear Clan, which is the same clan. The Mohawks have Turtle Wolf and Bear Clan, but they all seem to be of the same clan.
And you're the Bear Clan.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
your clan is speaking to you.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Do you happen to speak Mohawk, or are you just learning as you go?
I've taken classes. I'd be, I guess, considered an intermediate speaker. I'm not fluent. I can get through a day without speaking English sometimes.
Do your ancestors ever use the Mohawk language, or because it's sort of going?
Yeah. Funny enough, through the seer who does not know Mohawk words would come through her. She, my great-grandmother told the seer the word Dutta, which means grandmother. My great-grandmother was talking about her grandmother, and the word Dutta came through the seer. She didn't know what
Wow.
it meant. I said, oh, that's her grandmother.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I first went to the seer, when I was recommended to go, I was very skeptical. I never went to one before, but I was told she was the real deal. She's a non-Indigenous woman. And I'd say she's right most of the time. I guess none of them are right 100% of the time, but I'd say 75% of the time she was bang on, even if sometimes I would even disagree with her and find out after that I was wrong.
How many visits would you have had with her throughout the process of this book?
It was 4 or 5 times. 5 times, yeah.
And now, let's take a minute to thank one of the sponsors who made today's show possible. McDougall Insurance is the largest insurance brokerage in Eastern Ontario. They care about their communities by supporting charities and nonprofit organizations. Representing over 50 insurance companies gives McDougall the unique ability to find you the most competitive rates possible. Operating since 1946, McDougall Insurance focuses on their legendary customer service to help serve you, their customers. If you're looking for personal, commercial, farm, and life insurance or financial services, look no further than McDougall Insurance.
There's a lot of Mohawk in the book, which is
Yes.
pretty fascinating as well. When I'm particularly fascinated with when you say someone's Mohawk name and then you give the meaning to it. So you have your great grandmother is Sarah,
Yes.
I'm correct? And her Mohawk name means she carries the basket.
Yes.
I can't say her Mohawk name. Maybe you'll do it more eloquently.
Yundera Howie.
And Dare Howie.
Yeah.
And now in the book, you talk about people are given their names, and it can take some time. And you suggest that maybe there's been some talk about you getting your Mohawk name.
There's been a delay of that because of COVID. We haven't had ceremonies. Now, at the end of this month, we're having our midwinter ceremony, which will be our first one in 3 years.
Oh, great.
So the naming's been on the back burner for a while because of that. So we'll see what the ladies say. They decide.
They decide.
Yeah.
What sort of feedback have you received from the book?
Nothing negative, all positive. I've had people come up to me and cry in front of me as if they're reading it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or I've had people find their own roots. I've helped them, their genealogy. There's one man who was in Hamilton. He found my book down there, and his grandfather was from Tyendinaga, and for the first time he'll be coming to the midwinter ceremony. So he's finding his way back, finding his roots.
Just like you.
Yeah, the same. So there's lots of us out there. I was interviewed on a New York radio station that went out to 100 stations across North America. My book is being considered for an international award for independent authors. I'll find out later this year how that goes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're going to keep our eye on that one.
Some universities have it. The University of Winnipeg uses it for their Indigenous educators program, and I'll be doing a talk with them next month with their students. I've done that before, so it's
So the
good.
process was rewarding, but even the final product has brought many rewards for you as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was never about making money. It was all about just doing what I'm destined to do, what I'm supposed to do, and just hoping that it helps people. People get something out of it, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. So I think anybody can benefit from it.
Yeah.
Well, the book has so many layers to it. The Indigenous teachings, the historical context, your own personal experiences, and those of your family and ancestors. Is there anything you wish that you had included that is not part of this book?
I thought of asking my great-grandmother spirit that myself, but there may be additions in the future. There'll be a second printing coming soon, but maybe a couple of pictures will be changed, but not much else. But I'm thinking as time goes on, in that question and answers period, there'll be some more results from that. Some of the questions will be answered, and there'll be updates and things like that. Maybe updates on my own life or something like that. I didn't want too much of the focus of the book to be on me. It was just me in the introduction, and that was it. Step back, get out of the way.
So we'll have to wait and hear those details.
Yeah. I'm waiting myself.
Wait
for
and
some-
read them.
Yeah.
Your book went into great detail about how the Mohawk people came to be in this area. A lot of the information was completely unknown to me previously, as is a lot of history on a local level, frankly. But what was the research process like to find all of that out?
Oh, I loved it. I was probably 20 years before the book. I was researching my own genealogy, and it led into local history, and I was getting a lot out of it. I was learning, and I always felt that it was for a bigger purpose. And then when I found out that I had to write the book, I said, oh, this is why I've been doing this all these years, looking into this. I've always liked history. It's one of the few classes I got good grades in school. Like that it was about people and places, and I didn't find it to be dry like maybe some others do. And not just about the local Indigenous history, but in general. The first settlers of this area, like Hans Walter Meyer, John Myers, and John Weiss, and a lot of the original European settlers here were of Dutch and German heritage. A lot of people think of the Loyalists as being just British, but a lot of them were German and Dutch that came here after the Revolution. I've asked Doreen this year, do Indigenous communities, are they more open to what you do? And she said, oh yeah, very much so. It's very much a reluctance in the larger mainstream society. Formal education is important. It's good, but I think I find it encourages the growth of the left side of your brain, which is more analytical, and the right side, which is more intuitive, is not being developed in people the way maybe our ancestors had more of a healthy balance.
I would agree with that.
Oh, I love that.
I would agree with that for sure. So the book is full of history, and it seems like the imagery is really powerful and strong. One of the stories that I found fascinating, like I've learned over the years, and what I appreciate is the more I hear those stories, the more they stay with me. But to be honest, the back of a turtle, that was a new story for me. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
In Indigenous cultures, and I'm probably other cultures around the world as well, a turtle shell was seen as a calendar. Around the outside of the shell, there's 28 platelets, as you'd call them, and in the center, there's 13. So the 13 in the middle are the 13 moons during the course of a year. And the 28 around the outside is each 28-day cycle for a moon. It adds up to a 364-day calendar.
I loved it. I was like, I'm reading that again. Those stories are, that's history. And you have a lot. That book packs a lot of history.
And they're beautifully written in the book as well. Not just beautiful stories, but beautifully written. I found my experience with the book was that each paragraph was storytelling and painted a picture for me as a reader. Yeah,
I tried to read other books and try to be inspired to write so people could visualize as they're reading. And as hard as it is, try to get people, when they finish reading a page, to say to themselves, I have to see what's on the next page. And to try to continually do that throughout the book is very difficult. But that is what I was constantly trying to do. Once somebody gets into the page, I can't put this down. I got to turn it over. I didn't want it to be one of those books that, like Groucho Marx used to say, oh, wonderful book. Once I put it down, I couldn't pick it up. I didn't want it to be that kind of book.
The book opens and closes with a Thanksgiving prayer. Why was that important to include in the book?
It's really the foundation of the culture, to be grateful. It's where the Thanksgiving holiday comes from. It's this idea of being grateful, and each morning and each night it's something that we say, and before a meeting. So it's very important, and there's a couple other books on Mohawk people that do the same thing. So I wanted to open and close properly, pay that respect.
Who do you want to read your book?
Oh, anyone and everyone. I'm sure Indigenous, non-Indigenous people of all ages, male, female. I'm sure stuff there that anyone can get something out of it. Most of all, I guess, want people to read it who could get growth from it spiritually. I believe a lot of non-Indigenous people connect with Indigenous ways because it's part of their ancient DNA as well. If they reach back far enough, they'll find a lot of similarities in European cultures. Ancient European people were mound builders, just like people here. They're very spiritual people. They had an oral culture. They're thankful to their environment, thankful to each other. When I go to powwows, I find people have a deep connection, a lot of Indigenous people. Sometimes they're more moved than Indigenous people because they're so far removed from their ways. Maybe they grew up in a religious household, and they found it wasn't fulfilling for them. And this is like really touching for them. If you go to a powwow, the music alone, the drum, you can feel it, the ground vibrating from the drum and it coming up through your feet as you're dancing and into your heart as it's pounding. And so it's a very moving experience for a lot of people. I hope people get that kind of experience from reading this book.
And now, let's take a minute to thank one of our sponsors who made today's show possible, the Ontario Arts Council. For more than 55 years, the OAC has worked to provide grants and services to Ontario-based artists and arts organizations, supporting arts education and all forms of creative endeavors. Over the past 2 years, the OAC has invested over $78 million in communities across Ontario. Without the support of the OAC, this podcast would not be possible. Thank you to the OAC for your support and for all that you do for the arts communities.
What's next for you?
This year told me you're going to be writing more books.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I have a couple of ideas in mind. I've just taken a few notes so far. My next project will be, if I get enough information on it, it'll be about John Lennon in 1971. He came to see Leon Shenandoah, who was chief at the time of the Iroquois Confederacy. They're both peace activists and had a lot in common, and there's a few pictures of them online together, so I've been taking notes and like to write a book about that. A faith keeper who's like 90 years old now, named Oren Lyons. He was a friend of John Lennon's as well. Met him as well in 1971. And in 1980, he came back from Europe. I think he was speaking at the United Nations gathering there. And when he got back to New York, he was going to go see John Lennon. He thought, no, I'm tired, I'm going to go back home to the Onondaga Reserve outside Syracuse. And Lennon was shot and killed that night. Oh. So I think there's a book there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's people that are looking more for those kind of stories. And realizing that there's more that connects us than divides us. Yeah. So the more we look into, even just what we have in common.
Part of the idea is using an internationally known person like John Lennon to introduce people into our Indigenous cultures, our Thanksgiving and things like that, so people can benefit from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's going to be a really good book. I think it's important to tell the stories that people aren't necessarily going to know, just to give people more of an idea of everything, because we can be so self-centered, and to hear everything, like to hear someone connect different cultures with John Lennon, or to learn like your great-grandmother's story, it really helps the world just not focus on ourselves so much for just a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in our culture, people were more community-minded. Not as much. They still are to a certain extent, but because of the larger and modern influence, people are more independent than others, than ever before, and therefore don't need that connection as much. People are independent and do things on their own, and maybe the attitude, I don't need anyone, so they're more not as community oriented, just thinking of themselves.
Fred, I have to say that I love that beyond this book, you're also going to speak with university students, and you're out there speaking. You're an absolutely wonderful guest to hear speak today, and just have loved hearing your wisdom, and I'm excited that others are going to have the opportunity to hear it too.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything, do you have any other questions? Or?
I was going to go back to the powwows, because I think what you touched on there about the powwow is that if you haven't been to one, or, we're so caught up in commercialism. Everybody's ordering everything from Amazon. And when the powwows are always outside, you're connected to nature. the drum is in the circle of everything, you know, and then there's the dancing counterclockwise. It's just got a lot of, and traditionally, your history's oral. The stories have to be told. And I think the more, again, I come back to the more times I hear the stories, the deeper the meaning is for me too. I connect with it. But the powwow is something I think everybody should experience. And Tyendinaga has its own powwow every year in August.
Yeah, the
July?
second weekend in August every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I haven't had it since COVID,
Oh.
but hopefully next year or this year. I guess.
Have you celebrated powwows anywhere else in Ontario or anywhere
Did
else?
Hiawatha and Alderville, which are both on Rice Lake. Scugog, which is north of Oshawa.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one is Pugwagnagan, Golden Lake up in the Ottawa Valley. I love that one.
That one is, I did do the Golden Lake powwow one year, and that was fantastic. And Curve Lake.
Oh, yes, Curve Lake.
Yeah. And Tyendinaga, which is...
And Six Nations. Yeah, Six Nations is a very big one. People fly in from all over the world to go to that one. It's,
wow.
yeah. So there's different powwows for different tastes. You like to be where there's a lot of people. There's big ones, and there's smaller, more cozy ones with not a lot of people. Some are traditional, some are competition powwows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The one that I went to in Golden Lake, the speaker was from Kitimat, BC.
Yeah.
And she was a survival of the residential school system. And so there was a special dance, and it was, it's pretty powerful to hear from someone who's had that experience, unfortunate experience. But
yeah, I would like to say that, like, when it comes to my book, it was my ancestors calling me to write that book, not me wanting to write the book. And I do think those children, the first 215 children they found in BC, a lot of people think, oh, we found those children. I believe it's the spirits of those children finding them, really.
yeah. Yeah, well said.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to cover?
No, I don't want to give too much away about the book. Rather, people pick it up and read it for themselves. So I think that's about it. Thank you.
We could tell our listeners where they can find the book.
Yeah, so you can pick up the book. I know I picked it up at Chapters, and it's also available at Rebecca Miracle's store. Fred, anywhere else?
The Sacred Circle, which is close to Rebecca Miracle's store on Highway 49. Store Buddha.
Yeah.
The Buddha
Downtown
store
Belleville,
on Front Street. Yeah. They can contact me, leonardfred7@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook if you want a signed copy.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. This has been a really great discussion. I think this is an important book for people to read. They can learn a lot, not just about your great-grandmother, but the history of the area, which local history isn't told enough, and it really needs to be. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. Now I'll go.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.